So as you all just saw, the recording came up. So during all of this, if you ever need to go back and hear about how to do something, we'll have this recording, but I'll also show you some places to get videos and help online for some of the softwares we're seeing today. But thank you again for the introduction. I want to know everyone here in my Zoom gallery of all these faces. So if we could do like really quick, because we're already in 10 minutes in, but like a really quick, here's my name, here's my museum, and maybe your relationship to games, how maybe the last game you played, or I've never played games, or my kid plays games, or I think games are this. So something along the lines of what your relationship to games are. And hold on, let me see. Let's see who's in the meeting. So I can go from the top. Caroline Shapiro.
Okay. Hi, Cody. So I'm from the Tower of David Museum, which is the ancient citadel that guards Jerusalem's old city. And although it is an ancient citadel and a history museum, about 5 or 6 years ago, spearheaded and trailblazed, in fact, by hansd-on, who is also on this call. She started a kind of a revolution with bringing games and AR and VR to the museum. And in fact, we had an innovation lab for 4 years. So I come from international PR. I'm not a gamer and don't know anything about coding, barely switched my computer on. But I'm interested in finding out more and just hearing. I think it's really important and such an engaging way to do things with kids and adults for that matter.
All right, next on my list. Oh my God, I'm going to butcher the name. So maybe Leora, could you go down your participant list? Because like literally, I think I don't know how to say any names. Caroline was the only one I think I wouldn't totally destroy.
I was on mute and just spoke 2 sentences without understanding. Okay, so the next one is Adi Shalmon. Adi, do you have your? Okay, wonderful.
Yeah,
Are you driving?
Sorry,
okay.
I'm driving. There's traffic on the way, so I'm on my phone. I'm actually not from a museum. I'm an educator. I work in a high school and I teach art history. And my mother was the curator of the youth wing for 15 years. And I'm doing research about interactive museums and the connection of audiences and participants in museums. So that's why I'm interested in it.
Thank you. The next is Dorit Volonitz.
Hi, I'm currently the chair of ICOM Natist, but until recently I was the director of a natural history museum in Ramat Gan. And while I was directing the museum, we were involved in some projects that included interactivity in the museums. So it's very interesting, and I'm still working with the museum, so I'm interested in the workshop.
Thank you. Sorry for running this, Cody, but Daphna has sent everyone that her mic is not working, but she's from the Steiner Natural Museum in Tel Aviv from the education department. So hi to Daphna, and we have Edu Zoom, so it's the education department, I assume, somewhere. Are you with us? Who's behind Edu Zoom? Okay, we'll move forward. So Inat Sharon. Inat?
Hi everyone,
yeah.
Sorry I can't use my camera. I'm now working at the Jewish Museum in Tel Aviv, the new one that was opened 2 months ago. And formerly I was working, like Caroline mentioned, at the Tower of David Museum. We actually, like she did say, managed to create the first iPad location.
I don't think we can hear her.
I can hear her really, quietly.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, better, I think.
Okay. So I just said that at the Tower of David Museum, like Caroline mentioned, we designed the first iPad location game based that was designed specifically for the Citadel. And we had a very nice experience with that. And that's it. I'm very happy to see this forum continues.
Thank you. EduZoom is Haifa Museum's education department, and they don't have a mic as well. Galit Selector, Barak.
Hi, good afternoon. Excuse me, I just graduated from the museology and curation program at the Tel Aviv University. And I'm an educator, and my main interest is in implementing museology and curatorial practices in high school and education in general. And games are part of what I'm exploring, especially now with the hybrid learning, the long distance. So everything that is also connected with digital and virtual platforms. Thank you.
Thank you. Ghetto Fighters House. I don't see I Ghetto Fighters House.
There's a name too, Maydim.
Maydim.
I have never played a game on a computer, so there's my experience. But I know that our museum is now working after COVID on more hybrid learning, more digital. I guess I could call it gaming. It's hard to say that when you're talking about a Holocaust museum, but that's our point right now. We did have a program with an iPad, a very old, antiquated, sort of like 10 years old. Don't use that anymore. We're working on new things now. We have this like trunk that we have that you have to open and discover, and now we're trying to make it digital. So I think we're just at the starting point. So I'm very happy for this opportunity.
Thank you. Eliasu.
Hi, Hila from Jean Kodade Museum in En Hod. We don't have any digital games or in the museum we're working with.
Do you play games, Hila?
We play games, not digital, the museum, but no digital things. We try to we're now trying to do with the heat, what they have treasure heat, and I hope we succeed with that, but we don't have any. Thank you. I'm waiting to hear and see what we're going here. Thank you very much.
Ilana Carmeli, Lanel. Lana, are you with us? Okay, so I'm moving forward. Michal Adas.
Hi, everyone. First of all, for the Ghetto Fighter House, I'm the one that's making the digital form of the track that you were talking about. So nice meeting you. We will be meeting again at the end of the month when I'll introduce you to the digital game. So I've been dealing with gamification of educational activities in museums since, I think, 2013, when I started doing it in the Eretz Israel Museum. And I laid the infrastructure for all the digital activities that are running there till now. And now Noga and Mo, who are also present here, are continuing the good work there. And I'm a strong believer of gamifying educational activities in order to make them more meaningful and more fun. And I believe in fun during learning. So actually we built quite a few games and same games in Eretz Israel Museum. Now I'm just finishing building. Now I'm a freelance and I'm doing it independently. So I now finished 2 activities for the Ghetto Fighter House. One is the one that was that you were talking about. which is lighter than the other. The other is more interactive learning, which is quite heavy because of obviously the material that we're dealing there with, but it's also more pedagogical than the other one. So there's many kinds of games that I'm dealing with. Some are more for fun and less for meaningful or heavy learning. Some are for lighter than the others, but I find the digital medium especially splendid for that because of all kinds of reasons that I'm sure that we're going to hear about today. So thank you.
Thank you, Michal. I think since we have a short amount of time today, maybe we'll cut it to a sentence from each and every one. So sorry about that, but we just need to rush. Miri, Palmach. Miri from the Palmach Museum.
No, not from the Palmach.
That's your last name. Sorry. I thought
Miri
immediately.
Palmach. And I used to be the curator and the manager of Ben-Gurion's Desert Home and Kibbutz Sde-Boker, the house of the first Prime Minister of Israel. And now I'm active in the interpretation organization. And we had a lot of interactive games in Sde-Boker, but now I retired.
Thank you, Miri. Mor Chaimovich, U.S Israel Museum.
Hi, everyone. My title is a digital coordinator, but I'm a part of the educational department here at the museum. Like Michal and Hadass said, what we're doing here is building interactive digital games as part of the interpretations that we're doing for the different exhibitions. We're building them, most of them, on a location-based gaming platform. So I'm really curious to hear what else is out there.
Thank you. Noah Zandbank?
Hi, yeah, in Hebrew it's Zandbank. So I'm an educational advisor for different projects, both museums and visitor centers. My main I have two adolescents, so games are, very dominant at the house. And my main interest is in gaming as a tool for constructing new knowledge and meaning.
Thank you. Noga Ravad.
Can't hear you.
Noga, we hear you very, very well. It's limited. Could you improve the mic in some way? Not really.
Okay, so I don't want to spend your time.
Okay, no guys. Can you try one last time? Okay, we'll come back afterwards because we can't really hear anything, unfortunately. Raz, you want to introduce yourself? You're here. Okay, Raz, the head of ICOM, maybe later. Vital. Vital, going once, going twice.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm from Ramat Gan Museum of Israeli Art. I'm a curator. And soon the renovation will be finished and Ramat Gan Museum will be open in the next few weeks.
Yes, good luck. Is there any games planned for Ramat Gan? Not that you know? Okay, I won't put, I won't put you in the spot. Ruth Weiner. Or Wiener?
Did you call me actually?
Ruth. Okay, I'm going fast because, yeah, are you, okay, Shelly, you're driving Shelly, so maybe I don't want to risk you, put you at risk. And you're also on mute, which is a problem, but don't drive, don't drive and mute.
I'm very happy because in the mail it was written that it's impossible to be connected with the cell phone, and I must admit that it's the first time in my life that I'm doing a Zoom meeting in my car. I know it from my students, but I never did it. But as I told you before, I'm on the way to a motherhood duty. So I'm Dr. Shelly Shenav-Keller, and I'm from the academic world. I wrote my PhD 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, on the Diaspora Museum at that time. I'm teaching many courses connected to museum studies. One of the courses is education and museology. I'm also from time to time a curator, and I'm doing many projects connected to museology and curatorship.
Thank you, Shelly.
Thank you.
Tal Israel.
Hi, I'm Tal. I'm a curator and co-founder of a new museum named the Federal Museum of Nanoscience and Art, where artists and scientists are collaborating. And we just opened, and we are looking forward to find ways how to expose this playful ground of collaborations between artists and scientists.
It's the one in Bar-Ilan University?
Yes.
Ah, okay. We met in Anu Museum. Okay.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. Yael, Bible-Lands Museum.
Hi, I'm Yael, Bible-Lands Museum. We're actually opening an exhibit in 3 hours, and we will have a game in that in the exhibit. We've had we've had experience with games where I think like the second stage of learning from our mistakes and improving them.
Thank you. And last, as far as I know, Sigal Krinsky. Sigal, you're on mute. Can you unmute yourself?
I am a curator and registrar of Petach Tikva Museum of Art. I'm in charge of the art collection of the museum, and also curate an exhibitions from the collection. Now we will open in the 12th of August a new exhibition here. And I have a small exhibition in the historical museum that is also in this complex. We are 2 museums in this complex, historical and Petach Tikva Museum of Art. And we also have a big archive of Petach Tikva.
No games, Sigal, right? Is there any gaming going on in Petach Tikva Museum?
What? Gaming?
Gaming, interactive design.
Actually, now in the small exhibition that I have in the historical, I put a small game that I Ishalti from the yes, I borrowed from I try to find something because this exhibition is about החינוך בפתח תקווה בתקופות מאוד מוקדמות.
Okay, so education in your city, Petach Tikva, and earlier periods, yes? And
there is a school in Petach Tikva, 120 years, Pika, and it's kind of comparing between the way that children used to study in 1920 that compare to today. And the game that I have in the exhibition is a game that I bought from Denmark education, and it's called Dragon Box, and they teach how to use the geometrical, it's on Euclides book, and I try to show how I compare between games that are today, that children play today in the computer, and games that children did in Petah Tikva in the 1920s, that they were cooking and sewing, and everything was like to play. With playing, they learn. Something like this.
Thank you, Sigal. Such a great example. Cody, back to you. I think that's everyone.
I'm sorry, can I just say one sentence?
Yeah, sure.
Hi, I'm Paulina from the U.S. Embassy, and I'm super happy to see you all, guys, and thank you for joining. Cody, thank you so much for being with us today and in, 2 weeks again, right? Or 3 weeks. And as a former museum professional myself, I'm super excited about this. My game context is mostly watching the Olympic Games lately, but today was Simone Weil, and but having a teenager at home, it's pretty dominant in my environment. I think this is something that is really missing, the interactivity and all the fun together with knowledge that the games can bring into the museum experience. So I wish you the most enjoyable workshop, and thank you again. I will drop out at some point. Enjoy, make the most of it, and see you again in a couple of weeks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pauline.
Okay, cool. Thank you all so much for your introductions. It's really important for me to know kind of where people are with how familiar they are with games. Are they designers? Are they brand new to them? So it seems like many of you are educators or within the museum world and maybe have some experience with games, but I think it's a really good presentation for you all to see, because you get a good idea of what is out there and what is possible. Even if you have zero experience creating games, you have experience sharing content with people and getting them to think critically about that content. And so that's some of the things I'm going to be showing you is ways that you can do that through interactive software. So I'm going to get going, and really quickly, I'm going to go through my presentation of who I am and the games that I've made and the stuff that I do for the Smithsonian. And then I'm going to go straight into what games are in general, and some of the types of games that are out there, and what a game is and what interactives are. If I'm talking too fast, just like hit your screen or something like that. I can see most people, but I'm going to try to not go too fast, but I want to get through everything. So I'm going to get started. I'm going to share my screen real quick here. Right. Can everyone see it?
Yeah, it's on.
Okay, cool. Great. My name's Cody Colthrap. I work for the Smithsonian Institution. It's a big network of museums in America. We have something like 19 or 21 museums now. We just passed a law for 2 more, and a zoo and research facilities all over the world. So it's a big network of museums. I work at the Office of the Undersecretary for Education. So it's kind of like, in general, all the education around the Smithsonian's. And yeah, I make interactive content, and that means either digitally through games or hands-on STEM activities, or anything that through digital or analog means gets people to interact with our content that makes it a little bit more engaging or a little bit more fun. So I'm going to go through real quick and show you some of the work that I've done to give you an idea of the type of work I do, and then we'll go on from there. A real quick overview of our timeline. We're a little bit behind, but that's all right. I can skip a couple parts. But we're going to go through my projects and then go through what are games, what's interactive fiction. And then I'm going to give you 2 demonstrations of a software called Twine. And that's a really introductory level of what game mechanics are and what you can do even with zero experience designing games. And that'll be today. So pretty fun, I think, experience for you all. And I hope you enjoy it. And if you have questions, just throw them in the chat, or if you need me to slow down or repeat something, I can do that too. So my approach to games, this is an example of the very first game I made. This is the Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Garden. And so I painstakingly made this museum from the ground up. It's like to the inch accurate. It's exactly what the Hirshhorn looks like. It's like the most boring game I've ever played in my life. You just like walk around a museum. It's very, very accurate. I think it's very beautiful, but there's nothing like if you're going to go to a museum, like you wouldn't go to this museum, you would go to a real museum. And I started to realize like, this is not what the digital platform is good for. The museums that you go to, they have their strengths and this is not playing to it. So you can see I started to get a little fast and loose with the rules. Those big giant statues of Lincoln are only the size of a hand. And then I started putting totally things that weren't in the museum at all. And then I made the museum 100 stories tall. And then I started to realize, okay, now I'm starting to get somewhere like this, this doesn't exist in the museum. The walls are glass. I'm starting to understand that the digital space is not the real space. And what we do in the real space, what we do in museums, what we do in reality is going to be different than how we act and how we interact with the digital space. And so that, really got me thinking about what is it about museums that people enjoy, or what is it about the museum experience that we as museum professionals can bring to people to deliver that content. And so that really got my whole kind of career going of thinking about the digital space differently. And thinking about the museum as a place without walls, a place of glass walls, a place of total transparency and delivering content, not about the building itself. Okay. So this first project, I did a project about the Wright Flyer, the first flight, and we had a 3D scan of it. And so I recreated the whole world. I took the maps, the topographical maps of the area where they happened. I coded in wind and recreated the idea of what it was like to fly. And I showed it to the curator there, and he said, it's a VR experience. He put it on his head, and he immediately takes it off, and he's like, totally inaccurate. And I'm like, what are you talking about? This is a totally, the 3D model is exact. The map that you're flying through is exact like it was. And he said, the plane, when it moved, it was very jerky because this thing was not a very, well-built plane. You should have just asked me. And it went like the idea of me just emailing a curator and saying hey, I'm building this. It never occurred to me to say oh, we have the world's expert on this one thing. Why don't I just talk to them? I know his email, I can find it out. And so that was another big thing to me of oh, we have these experts. Why don't I just work with them? So the next project I did, I saw this presentation, this scientist in the bottom right of the screen, her name's Kimberly Arcand. And I saw this presentation about how she, using a machine similar to an MRI machine, how it creates sections, she used that type of machinery to scan a 3D image of a supernova, of a star exploding. And so she has this 3D scan of this explosion, and this data set is incredible. So I email her and I say, hey, I'm a game designer. Will you let me use this in a game? And she was wonderful to work with. She was like, yeah, of course. Here's the data, and let me work together with you. And so we created this kind of interactive about flying through a supernova and seeing what it would look like if you're surrounded by the invisible stuff, the invisible energy that our eyes can't see. What if you made that visible? And so what you're looking at in this 360 video is using the range of telescopes, radioactive light, gamma rays, X-rays, et cetera, that our eyes can't perceive. So what was really interesting to me about that is that, again, in the digital space, you can show things that aren't there. You can tell stories and narrate and illustrate things that people can't witness in real life. So that to me was really, really interesting. And so I've really started to focus on that of what can't you get in a museum space. And so in this video, Kim, the lead scientist, narrates all the science behind it and what you're seeing. And in the game experience, they can go and kind of create their own visual of what a supernova would look like. A project I did last year was a recreation of a coral reef. I worked with Dr. Nancy Knowlton, who's in the bottom right, to narrate, and it's all based on her life's work about the relationships between these organisms. So as you're swimming through this reef, you see this animal and discover it, and she tells you a little bit about it. And then you see how that organism is related to another organism. So it's all about the web of connections between these organisms. And again, I emailed her and I said, hey, I think your work's really fascinating. Let's make some kind of game experience out of it. Oh, there's a little GIF of it. So in the experience, it starts with no color, and as you go through the reef, it slowly gains color as it goes back to life. Here's one I'm working on right now. This scientist, her name's Dr. Rachel Page, and she studies the predator-prey interactions between bats and frogs. And so it's a two-player game. One player plays a bat, and it's looking for the frog, and one player plays the frog, and it's looking for a mate, and the frog tries to get a mate before the bat can eat it. So it's a split screen, two-player kind of experience. It's fun, it's goofy, it's colorful. But again, Rachel narrates some of the science behind her work and what it is that the kids are seeing and what the science is behind that. Okay, that was a really quick blast through of my work. Is there any quick questions before I continue on, or any hands raised? I don't see any hands. So I'm just going to keep going.
Maybe, Cody, I'll just have a quick one then.
Sure.
What's your most common challenge starting as a game designer working in a museum environment? Like, what's the challenge in communication with curators?
Yeah, right. For me, it's kind of getting people to settle on, okay, we're going to play this short interactive, and it's going to be maybe 5 minutes to 20 minutes long. What is the thesis of this? What is the most important takeaway? And how can I build backwards from there to make sure that the player, the audience, gets that takeaway at the end, that all the pieces kind of come together and, oh, I get it now. The frog has to make this amount of calls because otherwise the bat will find it. Or, oh, I get it now. All the organisms in the ocean are connected. If we take 3 or 4 of these organisms away because the temperature is changing, then the rest of the oceans will, it'll have catastrophic effects. So what's the thesis? What is it that you're trying to tell? And how can you work backwards from there? And that's really difficult to either get that main thesis, but then working backwards and making the game mechanics fit to that thesis is very difficult. That was a great question, though. I get it every single time is that challenge. Any other questions? All right. Well, we're almost back on track. So
Cody?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, good morning. Can you tell about the location? Where was the frog game situated? What was the connection between the visitor and the game around the museum? So what did they look for while I participated in the game?
Sure. Yeah. So that is a really good question. Almost all of what I do is totally digital. So because the museums, the Smithsonian museums, are very, very location based in Washington, D.C. So almost all the museums are there. If visitors, because the United States is really, really big. If visitors can't go to Washington, D.C., how can they get that same level of content or the same experience or the same message? And so much of what I do is completely digital. It's just from a website. in the frog example that you listed, they do have a research facility in Panama, and they have a little, what's called a tech bus. It's a bus filled with technology that goes around the local schools. And so this one was built both for everyone around the world, but also specifically for this tech bus to go around to these smaller schools and share what the type of research that the scientists in the area are working on. So there is both that element of here, this hyper local, this is specifically to your area in Panama, but it's also bringing the story to everyone around the world. So it's not, most of these are not in museums, right? They're just digital.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Other questions? All right, well, let's keep going. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what my philosophy on games or interactives are, and maybe change your mind a little bit about what you think a video game is. I think most of you talked about like, oh, my teenagers play this games and they're always in the house. But what does that mean? What is a game, and what is the definition of a game, and where will it go in the future? Let's get started. Most of you talked about what you know about games. So this is a picture or a series of pictures by this photographer named Philip Toledano, and it's a series of people playing video games. And he took snapshots of their faces, right when they're doing something really important or special or something. And I think it's the whole series is so interesting because it shows the like big emotions that people feel when they play games. And as museum professionals and as educators, like this is what we're competing with. And how do you make a museum exhibit, or how do you make an online blog or something that engaging, or how can you get that level of emotion? Because that's what we're competing against, right? This is what what the next generation of media consumers are grown up on. This is the level of engagement that they're expecting. And so, if we don't evolve and if we don't continue to match what that level of expectation is, they're not going to want to go. They're not going to want to experience our type of media because that's what they're expecting. So I think it's a great example of like, here's these big, strong emotions, but it's also a challenge to us as museum professionals. Like, this is what we have to compete against. So I love this series. They're really funny. You should check it out. Oops, let me go back. So how do games do it? So you see the big red circle. There was about 10 years ago, a Dutch academic that wrote a really incredible paper called The Magic Circle. And in it, he kind of outlines how games achieve this kind of suspension of reality. And in the basic idea is that games delay a reality in lieu of a presentation of new rules. Okay, so within this little circle, everything is the rules that you create as the game designer, and outside is the rest of the world. And when you're in this circle, when you're in this like magical little world, only the rules of the game apply. So as an example, you saw the shark. You're going swimming with some friends, and something brushes your leg, and all of a sudden some sound starts playing, and it's dun 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 dun. And what happens next, right? Immediately when you start hearing that music, you think there's going to be a shark attack. You as the audience, and it's this setup, it's this like expectation of, okay, this music is playing, there's going to be a shark attack. So as a game designer, you are setting up those rules, you're setting up those expectations and the consequences of what happens after those expectations. Getting a little bit more into interactive fiction, which is kind of what we're going to be doing in this workshop. Were these books, the Choose Your Own Adventure books, popular in Israel about like 20 years ago? Some of you are kind of nodding your heads, somewhat,
No,
maybe a little bit. They weren't as
well,
so,
not like the US, but yeah, there were
not like this,
some
not
moments.
this one, but we had a few.
Yeah,
I remember that as a child. I was looking for them a lot.
Yeah. So you recognize it. You understand basically. So in these books, you're reading part of the story, and then it says, okay, you know, ahead of you is a door. What do you choose to do? Do you go through the door, or do you turn around? If you go through the door, turn to page 23. If you turn around, go to page 32 or something. And so you flip through the book. Oh, here I am, page 32. I went through the door. So they were really, really popular in the States about when I was a kid growing up. And that type of interactive fiction was totally different than books, where you're just a passive consumer. You're just like totally linear. You're going from A to B as you're turning the pages. And that really like is an interesting way to think about how to give a reader some agency, some choice, by having them feel like they're in control a little bit of the story. So like if you're in a movie theater and you're seeing the woman swimming, you're like, go, run, swim away. There's a giant shark. It's going to eat you, right? If you're watching a horror movie, you're like, don't look at the closet, that you're going to get murdered. As a consumer of movies or of books, you have no agency. All you can do as an audience member is like scream at the person, what are you doing? But with games and things that the player has agency, you are that character, and it's a totally different experience. And so you don't have to be like you don't have to have like a AAA Studio 3D graphic, super high definition video game to have that same sense of control and that same sense of agency as a player. So I really enjoyed those books, and it's similar to the experience that we're going to be doing. But with those choices comes kind of like the consequence of design. You can see each one of these squares. You can see the arrows coming out. Every time you give them a choice, you're going to have to develop some sense of, if this, then this. So there is some level of design that goes into each one of those choices. So you have to be careful about them. I know a lot of you had kind of voiced concerns of like, oh, well, I work with Holocaust content, and the idea of calling it a game, is very, it's not fun. It's not something that's exciting in that sense. So, I'm hesitant to call it that. You can say interactive.
I can maybe help you, because we've decided to call it interactive activities instead of game because of the context.
Yeah, right. Me too. I say I'm an interactive designer, and that way I can get around many of the types of things I work with science or history, and just interactive. This example that I have here is a really good example of how to integrate science into a game. This game is called Lifeline, and in the game, there's someone that crash lands on a planet, and they text you, and everything is like, hey, can you hear me? Hey, I've crash landed. Hey, I need some help. And you text back and forth with this person that's crash landed on this planet, and they don't know what they're doing, and they need your help. And you, as this kind of scientist, can help them. And it's a really great shadow learning opportunity, because he'll ask questions and you don't know the answer, but you can Google it. So for example, it's really cold here. The sun's gone down. I'm freezing. I can see the engines running, but there's this blinking light that says radiation levels X%. Is that a safe percent? Can I sleep next to this? And of course, you don't know how much radiation is safe. So of course, you Google, well, what's the safe amount of radiation that I'm able to absorb or something in an 8-hour period. And that was very radioactive. So if you told the person, yes, totally safe, go ahead and sleep next to the engine, then they like will die the next day. But if you say like you need to get away from the ship, it's super radioactive, and the person lives. So it's this really fun way to Google and find out information while playing a game. Go ahead. I saw a
question, please. A technical question.
Yep.
Does it recognize the text that they type inside, or is it? It doesn't matter what they say. Is there a true answer or a false answer? If you understand what I'm asking, whether does it have to recognize the right answer, or do you have to?
So you can see the boxes are the choices. So you don't actually text in what the answer is. You choose this.
Yeah, it's too small for my eyes. That's why I'm asking.
Oh, I see. I can't see. Sorry. The text isn't really important. It's more like the idea of texting back and forth. So there are predetermined answers, like do this or this, and the consequence.
So they don't have to rationalize their choice. They just have to choose whether it's do this or don't do this. But I mean, you expect them to rationalize it for themselves. So they went and Googled it and tried to find the right answer. But the output is just yes or no, do it or not, or don't do it. So they have 50% chance of answering the right question without even Googling.
Yeah. So, within that, each kind of string gives you 4 or 5 questions. Like, okay, I'm going to go investigate the engine because I know there's water there. Okay, I'm going to go this, I'm going to do this. And they give you like 3 or 4 opportunities. It's not always just yes or no, 50-50. You die or you don't.
But it's not an open question that you have to imagine what they're going to answer and just fill in all the right possible answers, so the computer will identify which is the right answer.
Right. And I have an example of that, of you typing with an AI computer, and the computer kind of figuring out what the best response is. It's a predetermined outcome of what the choices are, because then the designer is able to create the repercussions or the results.
Thanks. It's a real challenge. This question, it's a real challenge when you develop a game, whether to make it completely open or determine the answers.
Right. And that's like that slide about branching decisions is all about that of how much is too much and where is the right balance of giving them the right amount of choice. So, okay, well, I'm going to keep going. And so we're about to get started on the first hands-on part. But I do want to, so if you're starting to feel kind of overwhelmed as you're working on these projects, I want you to focus on 2 different things. The first is, what is it, like what Lior's question of, what is the thesis, or what is the takeaway, or what do I want someone playing this game to walk away with? And then work backwards from there. Okay, how do I get to that, right? So really think about what the end stage is. So often with games, people think like, oh, I have to win, or I have to, beat a high score or something. But you as museum professionals, you have some sort of content or some sort of walk away that any museum exhibit will kind of have this attitude towards what the exhibition is. What's the takeaway of the exhibition? And then walk backwards from there. Like, how do you get that person to that point? So map it out that way, from what the walkaway is to how to get there. And the second, use pencil and paper. I have some Post-it notes here, but don't be intimidated by the technology. It's just as easy to plan this out on paper and think through, how can I do this? Even me, I'm a 3D designer, I'm a game designer. I still start with pencil and paper, and I still make my mechanics and interactives on paper. So those are my two big things before we start. Don't be intimidated by it, and just work with what you're comfortable with. Even if you don't do a digital product, you can start to get the idea of what the game mechanics are and interactives, and giving players choice, even through just a piece of paper. So that's that. Does anyone have any questions before we get started on the game itself? No? Okay. Well, let's get started on it then. So I'm going to run through a demo on Twine, but before we start, I want to share a really cool game. And Lior actually found this for us, and I'm going to throw it in the chat. Oops, I lost it. I'm going to stop sharing real quick.
Yeah, we actually saw the game that you shared, so I don't know, on our screen.
Oh. Well, I'm going to let people play. I'm going to give everyone like a couple minutes to play. That way, you don't have to watch me play. So in the chat is the game. It's called The Temple of No. And I really like how kind of tongue-in-cheek it is. It's funny, and it's really like the artwork is really cute. They hand drew everything, so you don't need a lot of. If you can doodle, you can make art, and if you can write, you can make the choices and decisions. But yeah, go ahead and play for a quick second and. Come back and tell me what you thought of the experience. And I'll give everyone like 3 minutes to play. Is that okay? And then we can talk about it for a couple minutes.
If there's anyone that is facing a technical issue, אם יש מישהי שיש לה איזה בעיה טכנית, תגידו. You can write in the chat.
לא כולנו עם מחשבים, אז אולי אפשר שבכל זאת הוא יעשה הדגמה.
אנחנו עוד 2 דקות נעשה את זה, לכן ביקשנו מחשבים, אבל כי גם עכשיו הוא הולך לעבור לטוויין, וזה יהיה הכל במחשב שלכם, כל אחד יעבוד עם המחשב שלו. אבל שנייה, אנחנו... עוד 2 דקות אני מבקש שנחזור למחשב שלנו.
Okay, so I think after a couple minutes, you start to get the idea of there's some text and maybe an image and maybe some sound effects, but the real interaction is that you're clicking on underlined words, right? So that's in general what Twine is. You're creating each one of these screens is a block, and within the block you have some content, and within that content you have some choices for the player to choose. Okay, so welcome to the game. You have choice number 1, choice number 2. You can click, and that goes to the next block. And that's all it is. It's very, very simple. It's very accessible. And so in the next like 15 or 20 minutes, I'm going to show you kind of how they built some of that. And then we'll take a coffee break, and then we'll go a little bit more into it. Sound good? So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen, and I'm going to show you how to get Twine or where to go to get it. So 1 second, let me share. All right. And so the website is twinery.org, and I'll put that in the chat as well. Oh, shoot. I can only put it in the chat if I'm not sharing my screen.
I'll do it. No
okay,
problem.
Thank you. So go to twinery.org, and I'm going to make my screen a little bit bigger so you can see. So you can see this yellow sticky in the top right, and there's 2 ways you can kind of build in the software. This first one up here is a downloadable software, and then you can also use it online. And I'll show you a little bit of both. So I'll real quick go into online, and so you can just see it loads it immediately. I also have it downloaded. If you use it online, it's important to save and to download your game so you don't lose your information. But if you're working locally on your computer, you can, it saves it pretty much automatically. So it's up to you. You can do either or. But if you're working online, you would just hit that button where it says use it online right here. And if you want to download it, you can download for Windows, Mac, or Linux. And I can show you how to do it in both. And so I'll go through it twice just so you can see it both. So I'm going to go ahead and use it online just so everyone can see, and you can work along with me if you want, or you can just watch. It's recorded, so you don't have to feel pressure to understand it this very first time. But this first session, I'll just show you some of the basics of how to use the software and what it does and what it can do. In the second part, I'll give you a little bit more advanced features. But essentially, Twine is this text building, like those choose your own adventure storybooks, software for creating interactive content. What it does really, really well is it tells stories and gives simple choices, and it's really simple to build. What it does not do well, it's not going to be a 3D platform that you see your kids play. It's not going to be like an app on your phone where there's lots of swipe functionality or things like that. It's much more about the content itself. And so for you as content creators, you really need to focus on your stories, on your content, and about making engaging choices for your players. All right, so you can see that there's this older version. If you want to do those, you can do those as well. But for this demonstration, we're going to be using Twine 2. So this older one is Twine 1. And then later on, I'll show you some places where you can find some guides. And important to know is that the structure of Twine that we're going to be working in is called Harlow. So if you're looking for, and I'll put it in the chat, if you're looking for how to do something in Twine and you look in something different like Sugar Cube, it's not going to come out the same way because it's a different structure. So if you just hit use it online, you're going to be doing it normally. But if you change something for whatever reason, it's Harlow is the structure, is the code that it's built on. So when you open it up, Twine games are called stories. And so to create a new story, you just go to the right and click add story. And you can see that there's an import from file. If you download what you do, you can import it back into this and work locally or not. So let's add a story. And I'm going to call this, I don't know, Twine demo. And I looked to see if there was Hebrew support, and I'm not 100% sure. I think you could probably copy paste the Hebrew characters in. So if you want to throw me some text in the chat, I can try it in here, but I'll be using English otherwise. And so in this field, you can see there's this box, and if I double click the box, it opens this. And if anyone has worked in a what you see is what you get, like blog type software, I'm going to write a blog post, or I'm going to write a Twitter post or a Facebook post or something like that. It's essentially like that, where you have the title and then you have the content of the text. And all of this stuff you can kind of ignore for right now, but some of it you're going to recognize, like bold, italic, strike through, and some of these things we'll get into later, things like if-and statements and hooks and that kind of thing. But for right now, ignore most of the stuff unless you recognize it. And we will just write something real quick. This is start. And whatever you see in this box that's written, that will show up. So this is the story. Welcome to my museum. This is a science adventure. Whatever you want to type, whatever you put in here, this will show up. So if I double click out and I go to the bottom right of the screen and I hit play, there it is. This is the story. Welcome to my museum, whatever it is, whatever it's going to be, it's going to show up here. Okay. Right now, I have nothing that I can do. There's no interactivity. I can't even hit back. So not a very fun game, not a very interactive game. So let's add some choices to it. Okay. So this opens in a new browser window, by the way, when you hit play, and to close it, you just close the window and it goes back. Okay, so let's add some choices for the player. So if I double click this, because we're using Harlow, the way that Harlow creates choices is through double brackets. So to do this, you just hit bracket left twice and bracket right twice. And now whatever's in these brackets is going to link out to another square. So the best choice. Okay, so let's click out again and go back to play. And here's the content. This is the story. Welcome to the museum, da, 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 da. And then it only gives us one choice. Obviously, it's the best choice. So if we click on that, it goes to the next square. So this little handy back and forward button will help you navigate as you're testing. So this is the first block. I click this and it goes to the next block. And what that looks like here is that here's this first block, here's the first text, here's the choice. And when you click on that choice, it goes to here, the best choice. And I double click on that. It's the same exact thing. I can add text, I can add content. And it's as simple as that. So if I wanted to add another choice, left brackets, the second best choice. Okay, now you can see that there's a branch of choices. And if I hit play, it gives me the same content, and then it gives me two options, the best choice or the second best choice. If I go to the second best choice, it goes to this. If I go to the best choice, it goes to that. And that is the kind of foundation of how to make Twine decisions. And obviously these are like super simplified, stupid choices.
So for instance, you could make even a simple math game with multiple answers, and then you can congratulate them for being right or correct their answers if they're being wrong or something like that.
Sure, let's build one. What would that look like? If I was going to build a math question, I could do something simple where there's a right answer and a wrong answer. So like, what is 10 times 30? And we could say 300, or we could say not enough. And hit play. And so if we go to 300, you can go back and write something like, this is mathematically, this is correct. But to me, like with games, I really prefer when there isn't a right answer, right? So I really like when there is two hard choices or two difficult choices, and that the player has to come up with their own interpretation of that choice. So when you're creating content, it's not about like the best choice or the second best choice or the right answer or the wrong answer. Try to think of it in terms of there isn't a right answer, and wherever they're going to go is going to be where they end up.
Cody, could you add pictures and movies to it?
You can, yeah. So you can, just like the example that you saw with the sound effects and the images. Yeah. So, and what's interesting is you can make the images the choices as well. So you can, and I'll show you in the next demonstration on how to do those types of interactivity. I just wanted to give you kind of the basics and the very, very simple interview.
One more question. One more question, please. Can I just do it on a map so they can choose where to go, as if the choices are whether I go to this or to that, to this exhibition or to this part of the museum, or so they can move along and decide where they're going to? And what kind of artifacts do they choose? If they
you can have like a series of images, and like you can say like which artifact you want to learn more about, and you have like a series of images, and they can click on those images.
For example, where will you find, if you want to find how the Neanderthal human used to eat and what dish did they use, you can go to this. Where will you go to? This exhibition, that exhibition, or that exhibition. But can you place it all on a map?
I think it's possible, but I think it will be very difficult because you're dealing with a lot of CSS. So you're essentially coding that on the screen, And it's possible, but I think it would be difficult to have like a map and the user like looks around with their mouse and clicks on the point on the map. I don't know that Twine is the best platform for doing it like that. I think with Twine, the easier way is that you have within the brackets, you're linked to the images, and then you have them in a series of images versus like specifically where on the map.
Oh, what tool will you use to scratch your back if you were living 10,000 years ago or something?
Yeah. I would have a map, and then I would have the map, an icon of where each part of the map is that corresponds with a link down below. And I think that might be the easier way to do it so that they can see where on the map it is.
Okay,
that's a good question. Yeah. So I'm going to show you one more thing, and this is also pretty basic, and then we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll go back and we'll learn some more like heavier, more advanced stuff like adding images and maybe some function stuff if we have time. Okay. So within these blocks, two roads converged, yellow, little Robert Frost here. A grassy path and path not taken. Okay. You can see this link is kind of long. So when I go to the start and I hit play and the highlighted word, it could be like a long sentence. And so if you want your player to go directly to, let me just get these out of the way to clean up, to some of these, there's a quick way to go to it. So you travel down the path, and now I'm going to give them the option to go back or go forward. And let's say you want to go back to the square you were at before. So you can see when I hit go back, it continues going down. But what I really want it to do is to go back to the start. So what I can do instead of having this block, I can then go into go back. And there's two ways you can do it. You can do an arrow. And if I do this, you can see the arrow goes back. So this arrow is just the hyphen and then the greater than symbol. Or you can hold shift and backspace and create this long vertical bar, and that does the same thing. And so what I've done here is that I wrote go back, and then I created a little arrow, and then I wrote the name of the passage. So this was start. This name of this passage is a grassy path. This one is go forward. So if whatever I write after this arrow, it goes to that one. So if I wanted to instead to go to a path not taken, I would do arrow, a path not taken, and instead it would go to this square. But I want it to go back, so I'm just going to write start because that's the name of it.
You have a question in the chat if there are existing templates that one can use to save some time.
Yeah, that I'm not sure. I bet because you can download these, I'm sure that there's really good ones out there that you can see the series of scripts, you can see like a branching path, and then you can just kind of adjust them on your own. Yeah, I'm sure that there's templates out there. During our coffee break, I'll look for some, and then you can, I'll share them in the chat. And so again, this is just a demonstration. This is not a wonderful game, but say it was, and I really, really enjoyed the work that I was doing here. I would go here in the bottom left, and I would hit publish to file, and that downloads an HTML version of the game. And back home where you said, where I was showing you earlier, import from file, you can upload these saved versions. So whatever the template will be, if you want to work from a template, I'm sure it's going to be something like that, where you import the template in by pressing that button and then uploading that file from your desktop.
I just wanted to say before you go to a break that I just checked, and probably you did as well, the people in the room, that the Hebrew is supported to a degree. It's just like most software in English, it just moves the Hebrew to the left of the page. But I think this could be fixed with the advanced features, probably, like just move the text to a different location on the page.
Yeah, right. Of like reversing the text to the left. Yeah.
So it actually, just like aligning it
to the right. Yeah. I'll look that up too. Align to the right, and I'll show you. I'll have the syntax for that, so you can do that. Okay, that was really basic introduction to what Twine is, and so I'm glad a lot of you were like, well, I really want to add pictures because I'm a museum and I have images. So I'll show you that next, and how to align the text, and maybe copy and paste in Hebrew, and just to make sure that it's working after the break. So I talked a lot. Do we have any other questions before we go on break?
I do. You said that you're using the Harlow structure. Is it the default one?
It's default, correct.
Default, both online and on the computer?
Yes. Okay. So if you download the software and you hit new story, it'll default into Harlow. You have to go through and select something that isn't Harlow. So anything I'm sharing as far as here's the videos, or here's the guide, or here's the wiki on how to do it, it'll all be based on Harlow. But it's important to know that there are other languages that Twine can use. So if you're looking for help and you find something that isn't working, it might be because it's not from that language.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, let's go for a break and give everyone an opportunity to either play with this or just relax your eyes and not listen to me for 5 minutes. And then we'll come back. Let me see, where's the timeline here? We'll come back at 5 o'clock, so 10 minutes or so.
Sure. I'll pause the recording as well.
Okay, great.
In 10 minutes.
For statistics, that's a good question. I'd have to look that up. And then if you're playing as a group, I think that would be the same question as the statistics, unless everyone was there. I'm sure that there's probably, it's just HTML, so I'm sure that there's a way through variables to print the variables at the end. Yeah, these are all really good questions because it's all about trying to figure out data about your audience and seeing what they're choosing and how to either adjust the game or how to adjust the content. If you see all the players are either stumbling on this area or all the players believe X because they went through this way. That's really good questions. I'm not sure, but I could look it up.
Is the output of the game just one HTML page? Because if it's multiple, then you can just have Google Analytics, I guess.
Yeah, right. Yeah, whenever I've exported it out, it's just been the one HTML file. But I don't know if you have a really complex game with lots of images and audio, if it's like a folder of resources. I'm not a Twine expert, so I haven't really built huge games like that. But it is HTML, and you can create variables, and we'll go through that in the next 20 or 30 minutes. So I think it's just a matter of collecting those variables and then printing it at the end somehow. I just, I don't know myself, but it would be really important to know. I would like to know. Okay, other questions before we get going? All right, well, I will go back to Twine then. And I looked up the two questions that you had. So the first is that it does support Hebrew characters, and I just grabbed some lorem ipsum. I have no idea what it says, so you'll have to forgive me. But if instead of this, we write some lorem ipsum I got off the internet, and then if I hit play, you can see, oh, well, sorry, I already reversed the text, but you can see that it is right aligned. So if you go to, let me reverse it, and so you can see how I did it. So if you hit play without doing anything, it's all going to be left aligned because English is the default. But if you paste in, if you go to the bottom left where it says the name of your story, and then go to edit story style sheet. So the style sheet is the CSS of the page. It's how it looks. So it's what color the text is, what color the background is. You can click edit story style sheet and then write this snippet here. So TW/passage, and then text align to the right in curly brackets. So you're just editing the CSS of the page. And then when you hit play, it will all be right aligned. And so you can just work as normal. It'll all be right aligned. And I think that'd be an easier way for you to work. And I'll save.
Sorry, I'll just want to copy it to the chat for.
Yeah, sure.
Can you show it again?
Yep.
TW. Sorry.
So it's TW passage. Yeah, I can't like with a screen share.
No worries. Okay.
Did you get it in there?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, so some real quick other things. If you hover over the square, you can delete a passage. So hit the trash can, hit delete. And the play button, and this just gives you some options of how it looks. So that's what these hover options are. I think what everyone wants to know next is how do I add images? I don't just want to have text, I want to have images, and that really starts to add some fun engagement to it. So to add an image, you're going to need the link to whatever image that you have. So whatever image you're using, if you're working online, it's going to have to come from an online other web page. And so I just went to my own museum. I went to our collections and I put in a search for illustration, and I found a bunch of images. And so clicking on one of these images leads me to where the image is housed. So if I copy the HTML of where the image is, so I go to some image, and I don't know how your websites are built for your museums, but if I'm looking at an image, I can't copy this page because this has all this other stuff, this HTML, these like links and all this other stuff. What I want instead is this image specifically. And so you have to find where the links to the images are. So it's not the web page itself. It's like, well, this is a book. But you have to find just the image so that you can copy and paste that image. Does that make sense? Or do you want me to show you another example of how I found it? It doesn't have to be from a museum. You can go to Google Images and I'll look for Mario. And if I click on this link, again, this is the page, but what I want is this image. A bad example because I can't get to it.
I think if you can click on right click on Mario,
yep.
Yeah, you could do copy image address.
Right. Yeah. So you can find things from Google and use them that way. So I just copied Mario's image address, but I have some other images as well. These are from my museum. So I'm going to copy those. All right. And so in Twine, if I go into my first passage, let's say I wanted to start this with an image. Okay. And to do it, if I just pasted the address in, so this is, oh, okay, here's Mario. Let's put Mario in and hit play. It's not going to work. It's just going to list that web page. So you have to add a little bit of HTML, and the syntax for that is a bracket image source equals, and then quotes, and then backslash in bracket. So again, now if I go and hit play, there's Mario. He's in the story. It's looking like a really ugly story, but I think you're starting to get the idea. Here is the other image that I copied from my museum. Again, I'm just going to paste it in here. It's just the address. It's not going to work. If I hit play, it'll show Mario, but then it'll show the address. So in order to make it an image, I need to create the HTML call out for it, which is bracket img src. So image source equals quotations on both sides, and then close that box by hitting backslash, which is next to the shift key, and then end bracket. And so let's hit play, and there's my image. Okay. And so I think you noticed this is really irritating. The Mario is really big, and if I adjust my page, he's even bigger. So one thing that you can do, another bit of HTML that you can do, is to create sizing on the image height and width. And so to do that, I'll go to, before your image sources, before your HTML links, you need to drop in a bit of CSS that tells it, okay, with all your images, I want the style of the image to have a maximum height and width of 100%. So you put in style, and I'll drop these in the chat as well. And I'll have a little cheat sheet for all of you with a definition of what it does. But you have your style in brackets, and then anything that's an image, so an IMG tag, which is all of these IMG, will have a max height of 100% and a max width of 100%. And then you end the style. So all the style after this is over. And that means everything after this is going to apply. So the max height and the max width of all images after this are going to be 100%. And so what that means is when we hit play, all of the images will readjust 100% to the size of the screen. So no matter what screen the users are using, it will then adjust 100% of the pixels to the size of that screen, so it doesn't go off. So those two are very important. You're going to use those all the time. But let's say you want lots of little images, right? So if you go back to your image styling and you say your max height, let's bring it down to something like 25% of the screen. So the max width and max height to 25, and hit play. And now the images are much, much smaller. So if you wanted to use these as links, you could go and click on the link. And that was what I was saying earlier, where you could have a big picture and then click within elements of that picture, you could click on them, smaller portions of it. Let's say you want to click on an image and make it go somewhere. So if I just closed off the Mario in brackets, so left bracket and right bracket. Oops, sorry, that was the other image. I'm going to delete it just to make things clear. So if I have two brackets like we did here with a grassy path and I hit play, it's not going to work. it's reading the brackets as something like, oh, this must be text. I expect it to be text. So instead, what you need to tell Twine to do is to go somewhere. And so again, the same thing where you do the hyphen and greater than to make the arrow. And then you can see this little pop-up just came up. This is saying, hey, do you want to go to one of these passages you've already created? And so I'm going to choose the one that I want to go to. Sure, go forward. And it just wrote in the text, go forward, and then end brackets. Okay. And I think I need to close these. And now when I hit play and I click on Mario, it's going to go to that passage. So here is the start. This one goes to the first choice, this one goes to the second choice, and this one goes, the Mario, this arrow here is the Mario choice, right? So again, I'm going to drop in my other image. Here, and to make it an image, I need to create an open bracket image source equals quotations backslash. Oops, my mouse isn't working. And that closes it, so that's an image. So when I hit play, there should be 2 images, okay? And now I want this one to be interactive. So I'm going to add the brackets, left, left. And then at the end of the passage, I'm going to do a hyphen, bracket, and then I want to go to a different choice. And then it automatically adds the other brackets to the end. And so now when I hit play, I have 2 choices. One will go to one choice and the other will go to the other. And you can use images as ways to navigate as well. Okay, any questions on that? I see, oh, there is some chat. I see it now. Yes, there is on the Twine website. So I'm going to go navigate there. So I've shown you a little bit of what Twine can do. I'm going to go back home and go to Twine and get out of my stories here. And if you go here to this main website, there's, oh, they've renamed it now to Cookbook. It's a reference. So if you go into here, oh, maybe this is something different, sorry. It used to be right here in Cookbook, reference documentation, sorry. Reading the cookbook. Oh my goodness. I might have to find you the wiki. I don't know where it went to. It was right there where it says cookbook. They've moved things around since I've used Twine.
If you want only the simple commands, there's a few cheat sheets you could find online. So I can copy one of them if you'd like, for just the links or changing colors, like simple stuff. Because I think the wikis might be a bit of an overkill for most. Yeah.
And these 4 examples here are pretty good to go into to just get a quick review of how they're organized. And there's lots of really, really good, I mean, anything, if you just YouTube Twine and how to insert images or Twine, how to align text, there's lots and lots of videos out there. So that's another really good one to look at, is just go to YouTube and ask your question. All right, so do you want me to go over functions, or should I keep going over some of the image-based things? how are people feeling? Do you want me to show you some even more advanced game type stuff, or do you want me to keep going over more basic type things?
Advanced, maybe.
Okay, let's go into it then.
Thanks.
So in games, you have lots of different things to track the player and how it moves through the game through things called variables. So your variables, if you're looking at a game, you can see you can have a score, your player's top score. You can see that the timer, which is constantly going down, or you can see your character's health, which is 100% down to 90, down to 80, or you can see your character's ammo. Like all of these things are what are called variables. And so games track variables to show where the player is what it's doing. Oh, bless you. And these variables are things that change based on what the player's actions are. So in Twine, you can create variables and set them. And as the player moves through the game, you can then change those variables as they go through. There are a few different types of variables. So there's a Boolean, which is a true or false one, integers, which are just numbers, floats, which are numbers with decimals, and then strings, which are text. We're only going to be looking at integers, so numbers. And to do that, you need to set them before you do anything. So I'm going to go here to the very top, and I'm going to set a variable. Let's see. Let's go back. I'm going to kill all this, and let's go back to. Oh yeah. If you have a blank. If you have a blank bit of text, you can, or a blank passage, you can get all of the, a quick demo of what stuff does. So this, you can see like, oh, here's the arrow or back arrow. And then some of this variable stuff that I'm about to go over of the if-then statements. But let's go back to the math problem, and let's say 30. You have 0 apples. And then let's take 5 apples. Take 10 apples. Okay. And now we're going to set our variable by using the money sign, and then set, oh, sorry, just set, colon, money sign, and let's call it apples equals 0. And so at the very beginning of this block, it's going to look at it and it's going to set the variable of apples to 0, okay? And now anytime it sees this money sign in apples, it's going to know it's 0. So instead we can take this 0 apples and write instead apples, and it will replace whatever the variable money apples with the current number. Okay, so if I hit play, you have 0 apples, and we haven't done anything to these two, so it won't change it. But you can see that it went from money sign apples to 0. So it's using the logic correctly. Okay, so let's get rid of all of these. And in this, we're going to use a little bit of game logic. So set, so it's open parentheses, set colon, and then the variable, so money sign apples. And now this is the take 5 apples. So we want to add 5 apples to it. So if I just hit add 5, it's not going to work because it's going to set the variable of apples to just 5. It's going to look at that and it's just going to say apples are 5. And that's okay if you have 0 apples. But if you had 15 apples to begin with and you wanted to add 5 more, you need to keep the number of whatever your variable was. And so to do that, you do an equal sign after the plus. and then it will set the apples to, it'll add that to whatever you had before. So now let's say either go back and let's say start, or take 5 more. Okay, you now have question apples. Okay, so let's try that out and hit play. So right now it starts, it sets, it says, okay, your apples number equals 0, and let's take 5. You now have 5 apples, okay? So if I take 5 more apples and I repeat that, I'll have 10, etc., on and on. Watch what happens if I go back. So let's go back, and it says, because I have to call this one start, not all caps. So just remember that it is, if I use all capital letters, or if I use one capital letter, that's important to know, because you need to adjust that in your code. So it was taking me to this start, not that start. Very common error. Okay, so I have 0 apples. I take 5 apples. I now have 5 apples. Go back. I have 0 apples. Uh-oh, wait a minute. What happened? I had 5 apples. What happened to my apples? So when it went backwards, it reloaded this script, which said set apples to 0. So even though you had 5 apples, it brought it back down to 0. So a common way to start that is to set at the very beginning, you set all your variables in this first introduction. So set apples 0. And you can say this is the start. Go forward or whatever. And this is the start. I'm going to go forward. I have 0 apples. Oh, I got to remove it from here. So what you're doing is you're setting all your variables in the very first screen, so that when you go back to a screen, you don't reset your variable to 0. Again, I know that's a little confusing, but I'll hit play. This is the start. I have 0 apples. Behind there is the setting the variable. I go forward. I have 0 apples. I take 5 apples. I now have 5 apples. Go back. I have 5 apples still. So it didn't reset my variable to 0. And I'm going to take 5 more apples. And now I have 10 apples. I'm going to go back and keep doing it until I have so many apples, I don't know what to do with them. So that's the very basics of using integers. But remember, there's lots and lots of different types of integers, or of variables. So you could have true or false variables. So you could say, if I go here and I get this, then I can go down a different way. For example, if I found a key, it would track the variable that the player has found the key as true, and therefore can go through the locked door. If the player doesn't have that, then they can't. So you can do if condition statements. So I'll show you that real quick. It's going to be a little confusing, and I only have 5 minutes to show it, but I'll do my best. So if the variable apples equals 5, then this is going to happen. So then else then this is going to happen. So it's saying if apples are equal to 5, then it'll show us this. It'll show us this statement. But if the apples are not equal to 5, it'll show us this statement. So you can show the player different passages based on what variables they've set. It can get really, really confusing, and I wish I had a little bit more time to share with you about how to do that, but there are really good videos online that I think can probably explain it better than me. But you can get if and then statements in so that, oh, whoops. These are Booleans, not integers. But I suggest going onto YouTube and doing some quick videos that you can take your time with, because I think we're a little bit out of time. So in the last couple of minutes, maybe we can kind of discuss what to do between now and the next meeting. And I think that would be helpful for everyone. So we'll meet in like 2 or 3 weeks. And what I think would be really neat is that you take your specific museum's material or content, or if you're an educator, some of the content that you have around either the museum or anything else, and try to create some interactivity around that. So getting the player to go through, and again, thinking about what it is you want that player to accomplish or learn or realize at the end of it, and work backwards from there to create some sort of interactive narrative that gets them to that point that they understand it. It's a hard challenge, and I'm sure you all have lots of other things that you're dealing with, but I think it'd be really interesting for you to try to look at your content in new ways by giving the players or the audience some agency in choosing what to learn. So any questions before we call it a day?
Einat asked about responsiveness and mobile friendliness. Do you know if Twine works well on mobile? I think so, no?
Oh, I think I tried to use it on my phone and I don't think I was able to. Let's see, let's try. I'm gonna go real quick, twinery.org.
So in the meanwhile, I'll say that if any of you need help, maybe I'll switch to Hebrew for a second. אנחנו יודעים שחלק מפה, חלק מכן זה פעם ראשונה, חלק בשוק, לא ראיתם קוד מעולם, זה בסדר. יש 2 אופציות. אחד זה באמת לעשות את הדברים הכי בסיסיים, משחק מבוסס טקסט, כמה אופציות בחירה, לראות שאתן שולטות ממש בדברים בסיסיים. פשוט הכי חשוב בזה לבוא עם איזשהו רעיון, ללמוד משהו במוזיאון שלכם, משהו שהוא מהשפה הזאת של עולמות התוכן שלכם, ויש כאלה, אני מניח שכן רוצות להשתמש ב-advanced features, וזה בסדר. אם יש שאלות, גם אני אהיה פה, אני תכף אשים את האימייל שלי למי שאין לו, אין לה, ואפשר לעשות גם עוד מפגש מתישהו בשבועיים הקרובים ולתרגל ביחד. בכל מקרה, כמו שקודי אמר, אם תקלידו Twine Help או Twine Guides, יש גם ביוטיוב, גם בגוגל, אפשר לראות גם המון דוגמאות. אני אשלח לכם כמה דוגמאות למשחקים תכף בצ'אט שכדאי לכם לראות, אפילו אם הם לא משחקי מוזיאון, כדי רק לראות מה הם עשו עם האופציות האלה, שיהיה לכם אולי רעיונות יצירתיים. סורי קודי.
זה נראה יותר טוב דרך אגב על המובייל מאשר במחשב.
So you can see it on mobile, so we have someone
very
who
good
already...
one. Very good. The game that he gave in the beginning.
So it looks better on mobile, the one. Okay.
Yeah. Producing the stories, absolutely, you can play them on mobile, but making the stories, it's much easier to do on the computer. So yes, you can share your stories on mobile and it works really well. But if you want to make them, I would suggest doing it on desktop. It's just much easier to type in than your thumb.
So I'm just copying to the chat a few fun games. So this one is called You Are Jeff Bezos that made a splash like 3 years ago, in which the variable is Jeff Bezos' money. And you can make decisions as if to see how much you can spend out of Jeff Bezos' money. Jeff Bezos, to those who don't know, the CEO of, or the founder of Amazon, and also a
but
space
since then
traveler.
we realized that just divorcing him will make more amount of money.
If you were lucky or unlucky to have lived with him, then you have money some other way. But the game is interesting because you see how with text-based choices, but with one variable, money going down, you can really educate people about wealth, inequality, problems, societal problems in the US. It's not a museum game, right? I would say it's something between a satire and activism, but I think it's really well made. You can try that out. I'm copying some other games that I haven't tried, but I have some recommendations on that are known to be. Oh, sorry, this is not a proper link.
Can I ask something meanwhile?
Sure.
So Cody, are you familiar, or are there at all some kind of sharing of games between museums? I know that some museums like the Getty and the Smithsonian are very much into outreach. So it's possible to take a game that is ready and then implant the images of a certain museum into it, or the ideas?
That is a really good question. I've seen some platforms that are made by museums that could work with other museum content. I'd have to find a few of them. I'm trying to think of what the Smithsonian has.
Or even games that are ready but are kind of can work in different museums that's already there.
Let me see real quick in what I have.
Like this supernova that you have shown, is it open to other museums, or?
I mean, yeah, it's online. Like almost everything that the Smithsonian has now is Creative Commons. So all of the museum resources, audio, images, etc., almost all of them are Creative Commons, so anyone can use them. With the supernova, you can go to it and you can use it, and any science museum could look at that video of the supernova or the online HTML experience. You don't have to pay for it or anything. But as for like the files, the 3D shape is online at3d.si.edu. I'm trying to think of any kind of game type. The Smithsonian doesn't have much. The Getty or the Met might have more, but there's just not a lot of that type of like templated game platform stuff that you can use from museums. It would be elsewhere, like some kind of pop trivia web page that you then use for a museum versus a Smithsonian building it.
Thanks. Thank you.
There's so many really good, funny Twine games. itch.io is a really good website for looking at that type of thing. Googling like best Twine games, so you get an idea of what's out there. I put in an AI dungeon link, which is really, really bizarre. We were talking earlier about, can you type to the thing and it understands what you type? And instead, all of these are going to be predetermined paths. But with the AI dungeon, it does it on the fly. So you go to a dungeon and you type literally anything. And the AI is based on GPT-3, where it tries to understand what you're typing and understand what your meaning is, and then give you text based on that. It's so bizarre. If you want to take a look into what the future of experiences is like, don't go to an AI dungeon where you're typing in, go here, do this, try this, do that, and the computer just thinks of something new and tells you what to do. It's really, really odd. Right now, it's only stupid things like dungeons and zombies and that kind of thing. But I could very easily see it start to become more integrated into the types of work that we do. And I have a lot of other science museum games. I think maybe next week, and the next time we meet. The next
session will be in the 17th, I think, like in 2 weeks.
Yeah, in 2 weeks. So I can share then. And then you all can share your games and I can see what you built.
So again, I see some of you are shocked. We're here in the next 2 weeks. If there's any questions, look at the examples You could copy from the chat examples and stories. You don't, I think, have to use all the fancy features if you didn't understand some of the advanced ones. Even if you can just come up with a story and choices that relate to your museum, that will be a great start for the next time. Just have a few, you know, just choices that make sense for you. So choices that actually are helpful in, as Cody said, in learning what needs to be learned from an exhibition or a museum experience. Okay, we have a lot of shocked faces, which is given after a technical presentation. This is, as we promised, this is hands-on. This is not just listening quietly on Zoom. So I guess for those of you who have questions and want to stay a few minutes extra, we can accommodate that maybe, but for the rest of you, maybe you feel welcome to start exploring. And I want to thank you, Cody, and I hope to see all of you next time with questions and ideas as we delve further into the examples and see how can we use these tools that you created. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you all for staying and learning.
Thank you.